I'm a female, and the story I'm about to share with you happened about 10 years ago. At the time, I was 17 years old, and like most teenagers my age, I was content to lock myself away in my room with a laptop and headphones. In autumn of that year, my parents went up north for the weekend. We live in Michigan, and the Upper Peninsula is famous for its scenery that time of year. I was left with the house to myself for the entirety of the weekend and thought nothing of it. I enjoyed my privacy and didn't mind being alone. Let me tell you about my house and where we lived. Our house is very old and a modest dwelling. 2 floors and a basement. All of the bedrooms are on the first floor, since the second floor is an unfinished attic. The house itself is about 8 miles from the nearest town. The backyard is pretty large, with an even larger cornfield stretching out for acres and acres, separating the property from the lake on the other side of the trees. The cornfield stretches partially around the house, creating a wall between our house and our neighbors to the east. It wasn't isolated by any means. There are 5 houses very near, 1 on each side and 3 across the street. A local hunter, a farmer, a retired couple, a construction worker, and a local preacher were the people I called neighbors. It's a quiet road, little traffic, and only the occasional coyote howled to disrupt the night. A nice, calm place to live. It was day 2 of my weekend alone. It was a chilly evening, so I shut my window and locked it before I huddled up to my bed with my laptop. I've always been a big fan of urban legends, especially legends that have some truth woven into the tale. Truth always makes a good story, and makes a scary story all the more frightening. That night, I had no idea that I was about to take part in my own scary tale. While I zoned on my laptop, watching horror movies and reading stories online, I heard an odd noise over my headphones. I pulled one speaker away from my ear and focused on the sound. The sound was coming from my window. My bedroom is a corner bedroom, and as a result I have 2 windows. One window is facing my neighbor to the west, and the second window faced the backyard. It was the second window that had the strange noise. At first, I thought the leaves and loose branches were getting blown against the screen, since it was fall and the weather in Michigan gets pretty harsh and unpredictable. But my reasoning didn't quite fit with the sound. It wasn't a banging or a rattling. It was like metal wires snapping. I removed my headphones and used my laptop screen as a light to see where I was walking without putting a glare on the window's glass. The curtains and blinds beneath were drawn, preventing anything outside from being able to see inside. I was nervous about looking outside. I was alone and had no idea what was going on. I hugged my wall as I slipped my fingers under the curtain and slowly, carefully pulled back one of the blinds so I could see outside. There, standing in the darkness outside my window, was a person holding a knife cutting at my screen. My heart skipped a beat and my blood ran cold. My instincts told me not to make a sound and to stay out of sight. I slid down my wall and crawled on my hands and knees to my cell, sitting on the small table next to my bed. I called 911 and whispered everything to the person on the other line. I told them that someone was outside my window, and he had a knife, and I was alone. The operator stayed on the line with me and kept reassuring me that the police were on their way, and I could hear the screen being cut open. I kept telling her that I wanted to run, but she insisted that I stayed put and didn't make a sound. Suddenly, the snapping sound of the screen wires being cut stopped. I listened and I almost screamed in fear when I heard a new sound. The knife was digging at the wooden frame of the window, and a man tried to pry it open from the outside. The motion and light in the backyard suddenly flashed on just seconds before the red and blue lights of the arriving police car shone through my other window. I listened carefully and heard someone running from the car to the backyard. I could hear the radio crackling on and off as they checked the area. A loud knock on my front door made me jump. I heard a man call out for me, identifying himself as a cop. Still scared, I opened my bedroom door and crept down the hall. I peeked into the living room and didn't see anything. The knocking persisted, and again the cop identified himself. I peeked through the window and front door and saw him standing there, his eyes still checking the yard. I flung open the door and almost pulled the cop inside my house, just so happy to see someone else. He asked if I was okay and if I could give a description of the man I saw. I couldn't. He was wearing all black and had a hood pulled up, which shrouded his face. All I could do was describe the large hunting knife he used to cut my screen. His partner joined him on the front porch and told us that he didn't see anyone in the area. I kept insisting on what I saw, and they of course believed me, since the patrolling officer saw the damage on the screen. The cop did a second sweep of the property and made sure every single window was secured and that the doors were locked and the garage was secure. Before leaving, the cops told me they'd keep a patrol car in the area, but they were confident that whoever I saw wouldn't be back. They just figured it was some teenager who was trying to break in through my window and got scared when he saw the police car arrive. I thanked them and proceeded to double-check the locks for myself. I wanted to call my mom, but I knew my parents were already on their way home and would be back by morning. Unable to go back into my room, I chose to sleep on the couch in the living room and tell my parents as soon as they walked in the front door. About an hour later, after I was finally able to relax and started to drift to sleep on the couch, I heard a large bang against my back door. I sat straight up and looked through the kitchen to the back mudroom that leads to the back door. This time, I knew I was in danger. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911 again. This time I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife from the butcher's block and huddled on the floor against the counter and cabinets. I pressed the phone to my ear as the operator, a man this time, continued to talk to me so I didn't feel so alone. I gripped the knife tighter and began mentally trying to psych myself up. If this man managed to get inside, would I be able to defend myself? He had a knife. Maybe that's why I grabbed one too. But I didn't know anything about him. How tall was he? How strong was he? Did I even stand a chance? I heard the wood on the door frame crack. The old door was locked on by a chain. One more hard kick would surely break the door down, and then I didn't want to think about it. I prepared for the final bang, for that door to give in and for that man to attack me, when I heard a voice yelling over the banging noise. "Get on the ground! Drop the knife!" "Oh, thank God," I said out loud. "The cops are here." The operator on the line, who had been speaking to me throughout the entire ordeal, continued to try to keep me calm. I listened to the cop order the man to drop the knife over and over again. But I just knew that the crazy bastard wasn't listening. Then another bang. But it wasn't from someone outside the back door. It was from someone firing a gun. It was silent, and time seemed to stand still. A gentle knock on the front door drew my attention. The same cop as before was the one again identifying himself at the front door. I told the operator a cop was at the door and hung up. I opened the front door, a knife still in my hand. The cop saw it and very calmly suggested I put it down. My hand was gripping the knife so tightly that my knuckles were white and my fingers were cramped. When I dropped the knife, the cop escorted me from the front door to his car, which was parked in the side yard. Under the motion lights of the backyard, I could see his partner standing over the body of a man in black. I could see his knife laying on the ground just inches from his hand, and even from this distance, I knew there was blood on the blade. The man himself looked like he had been dead for weeks. His hood had fallen from his face, revealing it to the night. He was white and impossibly pale. His skin was unnaturally aged, with heavy wrinkles and lots of discoloration. His hair was long, stringy, and blonde. His eyes, still open, were sunken into his skull. I was taken to the police station to deliver a statement and to ensure that there would be no other attackers on my property. When I told them everything I knew to the interviewing cop, another cop walked into the room with a file in his hands. He whispered something to the first cop and handed him the file. I asked the cop if he knew who the man was, and he nodded. I asked to know who he was and what he wanted. At first, he didn't want to tell me, but I needed to know. I managed to coax him into telling me, and part of me wishes I had let it go. The man was a chronic junkie who abused any and all kind of drugs he can get his hands on. He was also a violent schizophrenic with bipolar disorder. He used to live in the area until he was finally locked into a mental hospital about 20 years prior. The act that got him locked away all those years ago was a result of his attempt to burn down the local church, declaring that he was the true Son of God, and that all religious figures, priests, ministers, etc., were false prophets and tools of Satan. The cop figured that he was trying to break into my house because he thought it was where the preacher lived. He had the wrong house, and would have killed me anyway if he had gotten inside. After a moment of letting this sink in, I asked why the cops didn't see him the first time I'd called. His answer sent shivers up my spine. and now I never look at my backyard the same. He told me that the man had hidden in the cornfield the first time and was watching the house from between the rows. He had never left. He was always there, watching the house and waiting for the police to leave. He truly was crazy, and I'm glad he won't be around anymore.